My guest today is Tristan Scott. Tristan has a bachelor's and a master's degree in electrical engineering. He's an author and former college athlete. During his athletic career, Tristan suffered many injuries that led him down rabbit holes to natural and holistic healing practices. He has deeply researched the connection between electromagnetism and human biology with a specific interest in how man made electromagnetic fields could be negatively impacting human health. Currently, he is head of operations, hardware, and marketing at Daylight Computer Company. He is now applying that knowledge at Daylight Computer, whose mission as a company is to create technology that is healthier and more synergetic with humanity. Daylight Computer Company, in my opinion, puts human health over anything else. Now, my conversation with Tristan Scott.
Hey Ryan,
Hey Tristan, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Not bad. I'm jealous of you. Your your environments, the things that you always post was like, man, he's got it right.
I'm trying my best. If I wasn't working for Daylight, I would just be out here wandering around all day. It would be nice, but it's like if you have to stare at a screen all day for something as important as Daylight, might as well be out in the wilderness if you can. So it's cool. The
Yeah.
Starlink solar panels work really well. I'm like, it's kind of crazy.
That's good news. That way you can stay out there.
Amazing. Yeah, let's do it. I think it's great timing. I think I mentioned the DMs, or I don't know, but we're launching our initiative next week called Daylight Kids, and it's going to be highly targeted to parents for children. And yeah, it's where, as you could guess, where we could have the biggest impact. So, would love to get into that. Obviously, ASD children is a big one for that. The neurodivergent kids as well need it more than anyone, really. So,
Do you just want to start with a little bit of background about yourself and the path into your passion for natural and holistic health, and confirm or correct if I use the word natural and holistic correctly there.
yeah, for sure. Well, I'm very fortunate, I would say, because I did not grow up with a standard American upbringing. My mom is from Austria, so I very much grew up with a family that was hiking, camping, eating like dinners, home cooked meals, like all the time. We'd never had chips, soda in the house. Never like really went out to eat. Spent summers in Austria, so the quality of living there so much higher than standard American lifestyle. So very fortunate in that regard, and always because of that had a deep appreciation for the outdoors, for nature, and also just movement. I played a lot of sports, and I ended up playing soccer in college, and that led me to having a one too many concussions. So that's kind of how I got down the rabbit hole of health optimization. So as a normal teenager and a young adult in college, kind of the lifestyle went off the rails in terms of sleep, partying and eating terrible food, all that good stuff when you're like 19, 20 years old. And then I was a college athlete, so I was also just banging my head all the time and had one too many concussions when I was right after I was 21. Yeah, 21 years old, after my soccer career just ended, and really did everything wrong in the acute recovery phase. So was still playing sports, drinking, and not sleeping well. I just didn't do anything to recover because I really didn't know that I had a concussion, and it ended up making that situation really bad. And I dealt with post-concussive syndrome for over a year, really like 15 months of really bad daily headaches, extreme fatigue, couldn't exercise anymore. And I was pretty depressed because I went from being an electrical engineering student, a college athlete, super high functioning person, to all of a sudden not being able to do pretty much anything, having to sleep 12 hours a night. Luckily, I'm very stubborn, and I didn't accept that as like my new normal. So in the summer of 2018, I really just started meditating and going down these rabbit holes, because I realized that I was not accepting this as a 22-year-old as my new normal. And that summer, coincidentally enough, I was in Portland, Oregon, and I was spending a lot of time in nature on the weekends. And I realized when I was out in nature, I felt better. Like my
Mhm.
brain didn't feel as inflamed, and I didn't even sleep as well. I was in a tent. I was hiking. I was like physically exercising. And little did I know back then, but the no service, no EMFs, not staring at a screen, just being out in the real world was profoundly helpful for me to really just have a breakthrough. And then I started researching, reading books, podcasts, etc., on how to heal the brain, overall healthier lifestyles. So I just started implementing a lot of things there, and I started feeling better. And throughout 2018 and 2019, I made leaps and bounds of progress. I, cut out processed foods, was really deep into the stress management, sleep hygiene, taking some supplements. I actually took a lot of fish oil, high potency DHA back then, which now I know how important that is for brain health from a quantum perspective, which is cool. And just kept progressing. And, I graduated college, and all of a sudden I had gone through this pretty profound health journey, and I didn't really want to go back to that lifestyle I had before where I was working out a ton during the week and partying on the weekends. So I decided, hey, I'm a young adult in the world. Health is like one of the most important things to have knowledge about. And it's clear as I was learning that there's all this misinformation out there. And really, so many of us were just misled and living unhealthy lifestyles, and it could be really simple. So I kind of became obsessed with that, and then COVID happened, of course, and I was very primed to have a perspective on that front, and just kept going down the rabbit holes of regenerative agriculture, the food system. At first I got really into that. I wrote a book discussing kind of the issues of our food system, and also tied in Bitcoin with that, as well as other passion of mine. And then after I closed that chapter up, really simultaneously continued to improve my lifestyle, and felt better than I did even before my concussions, because I was spending more and more time outdoors and really just aligned lifestyle. I realized that my degree in electrical engineering could be very pertinent to the discussion about biology and health.
Mhm.
And I was, for years, I bought my first pair of blue blockers in 2018. I got a grounding mat, I think, for my birthday in early 2020. Like, I was turning my phone in airplane mode for years, but I hadn't really gone deep down the rabbit hole. And as I got on social media for networking, promoting my book, I realized there was people talking about EMFs and light and these more electromagnetic aspects of our biology and of the planet and of nature, and they didn't really know what they were talking about, or they were using kind of terms that were very technical, and they weren't explaining it well. So I realized that with my background in electrical engineering, I could fill a gap, or at least be a voice in this space. And the more I learned and kind of went down those paths, the more I started to come to the conclusion that the electromagnetic aspects of our biology might be the most important thing, and it's the most under discussed because it lacks tangibility, and people really lack the foundational knowledge to even grasp it. And that's where now so much of my passion lies. And since then, I've, of course, just like continued to learn and dial in my environment to the best I can, given the state of our modern world. And then, of course, that led me to a podcast that I hosted, and then to Daylight, which is really a dream job to help bring that to the world. So that's kind of the background story, and it's fun because I went to school for electrical engineering, and I was not very passionate about it and during schooling, and it's also one of the most challenging majors that you could do. And I got a bachelor's and master's degree, and was a student athlete in the library 40 hours a week. I hated my life. It was a grind. And it wasn't until recently that I really had an appreciation for that knowledge, and really I ended up relearning a lot of the fundamentals. But I always had this fascination with it, and I didn't know why or where that would apply. And only in the past couple of years has it became super clear, in terms of the purpose of that. So it's a pretty great full circle moment for kind of what I left my adolescence to focus on.
It's hard to even dream about the path and the discovery that this led you to. Like, you would have never dreamed of that. That's an amazing story. So, how did you get involved with daylight?
Yeah, so funny enough, and I don't know if you remember, but I had a podcast called Decentralized Radio, and that's where I was just like really passionate about these topics, starting to go down, reading all these scientific papers. I was really into regenerative ag. I was really into Bitcoin. I was really into health. I was like, no one's really talking about this intersection of all these topics.
Mm.
And started the podcast with a friend, and I just wanted to interview people that I thought were interesting: researchers, farmers, ranchers, doctors, etc. And I spoke with Dr. Jack Cruz in December of 2023, and I think I remember seeing him post about like something on his Instagram and didn't really look too much into it. And then he told me, he's like, after we did our podcast, which is mostly about EMFs, and he knew I was an engineer, he's like, you need to talk to Unjin from Daylight, like immediately. He's like, you guys need to link up, and that needs to happen. So I was like, okay. And then reached out to Unjin, had him on my podcast like 2 weeks later. And it wasn't like I didn't really, the website didn't have that much information. I was like, oh, this looks cool, blue light free computer, blah blah blah. But it didn't really click until halfway through my podcast with Unjin, just how important this was. And it was clear to me. I was like, oh, this guy's spent his whole life's work trying to build a healthier computer, and he's about to bring it to the market. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most important company in the world, because I knew better than anyone. The last 2 years, I was spending more and more time on social media, building a personal brand, just being on the internet. And I actually started to plateau in how I was feeling, because I spent more and more time on screen on my phone. And it didn't matter how much sun I got, how many steaks I ate, or how dialed in my house was for EMFs. I was still on tech, and I couldn't swap out that tech for something healthier. Like, I just couldn't. There's no option, and we're talking about the biggest companies in the world. And ironically enough, my background, I worked in the semiconductor industry, and I went into the business side of things. So I was very familiar with the supply chain of electronics and just how that hardware world works. And then, of course, because of my knowledge of the health space and also building a brand on social media with marketing, it was really like the perfect culmination of joining Daylight. And I immediately stopped everything I was doing and jumped on board. And it was a lot of fun, because I'd never worked for a startup. You learn so much in such a short period of time, and now leading a lot of things in the business. And it's really, I think, a great partnership. It's a great team that we have, but Anj and I, very complimentary, and it's a lot of fun because, again, I look back at everything I've done in my life. Studied electrical engineering, really into nature and health, worked in the electronics industry, just like the way I kind of, I led teams and was on a soccer team. So the startup world, although it was so foreign to me, like actually has been a great fit for kind of just the experience I've had. So it's literally like everything I've done in my life has built up to this moment to ensuring that Daylight is successful. And I truly believe that our success will equal a much better world for everyone, because we're really in a dire state, I think, with our relationship with technology, and especially the next generation. It's scary. And I often forget that, because I live in this bubble. Like, I've seen like 10 people in the last, days. And I don't interact often. I mean, I go to San Francisco where our office is, and it's a culture shock for me in the moment. But like, I'm not in schools. I don't have kids yet. And I think that we really have a window to change this course that we're on with technology. Else it may just get to a point where there's no turning back of how it's affecting us both mentally and physically. from a health perspective.
Yeah, and I think we're very close. We're very close to that no return. It's almost like daylight's the only hope right now. I've had John Coates from RF Safe on, and
Mm-hmm.
the EMFs are underrated. Um, it's so fascinating too that you didn't allow yourself to settle. You were always pivoting and reaching for something higher. It's like your daemon. You called it daemon. So that allowed you. I think that's the path that allowed you this opportunity. Can you go over some of the benefits of the DC-1, especially in comparison to other big tech options?
Absolutely. So, and I don't know how many people watch video, but I can pull one out here. It's all dirty. But you know, I think starting with why technology is not great for us is the easy point to begin. And for me, there's both physical, like direct reasons, and then there's indirect. And I'm going to start with one of the major indirect ones, is that it keeps us indoors. Most people, unlike me, are not working outside. And there's a reason for that, is because the corporate office culture, I mean, physical workplaces, but also because technology is not really designed to be used outside.
Mm,
The batteries die very quickly. It overheats very easily. You can't see it in the sun. It competes with nature. It doesn't work with it. So our transformation from an outdoor to an indoor species, in my opinion, is one of the main drivers of chronic disease. And it is because we evolved to live in the natural world, and I like to call it the real world. And the technology and the companies behind it, they have created an artificial reality. And I'm not even talking about the metaverse. I'm talking about just anything through the digital medium that we consume. It is an artificial reality. It's not physical. It's purely digital. As much as I love connecting through through FaceTime or visual video chat here, like I'm seeing a pixelated version of you that happens to
yeah.
represent you. It's not really exactly physically you. And that's something that is very foreign. And then it's removing us from these input signals that we were designed to take in and drive our biology. So the full spectrum of sun, the Earth's natural geomagnetic field, their grounding you get from touching the earth, of course, the greater ecosystem of colors and scents, and there's so many rabbit holes to go down there of why nature is really beneficial. And it's not even beneficial. This is like baseline.
Mm,
It's only beneficial because it's lifting us up from where we're at now. But in
yeah.
reality, this is just like what it should be. It's
Mm,
normal. It's only been touted as a benefit or healing because we're so sick. And
mm,
we're so sick because our indoor environments, they lack these inputs. The light is distorted, and now it's been completely alienated away from full spectrum sun. The air is stagnant. There's no negative ions that are very important. We're insulated, and then we have this high concentration of non-native electromagnetic inputs, from the Wi-Fi to the power frequencies to the blue light coming from the screen. And that gets into the direct kind of negative benefits of technology, right? That's the environment we're in. And that's not even to begin the device itself, where the devices themselves, yes, they are emitting radio frequencies. They have also DC magnetic fields. Charging them emits more dirty electric fields, giving us an unnatural AC body voltage. And all these things, hundreds, thousands of studies showing potential and harmful biological effects. And then there's really the big one, which is the light. The light from the screens themselves are very, very different from light outside. And it's completely lacking in full spectrum um, colors and wavelengths. And it's very isolated in narrow bands of light, specifically in blue light, and specifically lacking in like red and infrared. And for those that don't know, infrared is the majority of sunlight. It's like 50 to 55% from an energetic perspective. From a photons per second perspective, upwards of 70% of sunlight is infrared. And the infrared light is long wavelengths, lower energy, and it really balances out the higher energy visible and ultraviolet wavelengths. So it's, as in nature, all things are more balanced and they're offset, and they all have specific biological functions. So when you distort that, you're really distorting the input signals that we need. So the devices, then, blue light in isolation has been shown to harm mitochondrial function, especially in our eyes and the retina. And then we look at them at nighttime, and that disrupts our circadian rhythm. Blue light is the master signaler for our circadian clocks. So then all of a sudden, one, if not the most important aspect of health is sleep, because that's when we restore and repair the day's cellular damage, is now completely being hijacked in terms of the quality of it, because we are disrupting our circadian rhythm, suppressing the melatonin by staring at these devices and their screens. And we also have these non-native EMFs ongoing, typically all night as well. And we wonder why our cellular processes are really in a bad state, and we're seeing chronic disease younger and younger. And that all, to me, comes down to mitochondrial dysfunction as well, that's being passed on not only throughout someone's lifetime, but generationally as well. And that's the scariest part, and potentially why things like autism are skyrocketing, because we're passing on this mitochondrial heteroplasmy, and everyone's starting off in a far worse place. And when we're children, we're most susceptible to all of these negative effects. So you take that, and then you also consider that the light itself is flickering on and off to control brightness. That's yet another stressor, especially problematic for people with ASD or people with neurodivergent symptoms, because it's so much more of another stressor and stimuli affecting our brain and eyes, and we don't even realize it until you get home after a day's work and your eyes are just so fatigued and tired. And none of this is really up for debate. This has kind of been proven and shown in studies. Even engineering articles agree that this is the case. So that's where we're at. We have these, and this is like facts of science, physics. Then we get into the dopaminergic component of it. Like, I don't even need to talk that much about, everyone knows that your phones, like, you can't even put it down, because another component of blue light is that it's the most dopaminergic wavelength. And that makes sense when you realize during the day, like, I'm outside right now, there's so much blue light here. That's telling my body, wake up, go do things. Like, it's reward seeking behavior. But now they've concentrated that and put it into, a handheld device. And it's in reality a Las Vegas casino, to where we have all these bright flashing lights. It's cut off from the natural world, and we can't help but sit down and pull the slots all day. And it's environmental design at the highest level with these big tech companies. And when you realize that the entire economy is driven off attention now and consumerism, and these advertising companies like Meta, it makes total sense as to why it's gotten so good that it's really impossible almost to not fall in and not get sucked in. And that's where we stand right now. We have the most important aspect of humanity is technology by far. And the most important aspect of technology right now is devices. And we use them every single day. The majority of our waking day, almost 90+%, no one is ever away from their phone or away from their devices, really, for more than a few minutes a day now. That's how ubiquitous, that's how pervasive it is. Everything's done through the digital medium. And it just so happens that we have all of these detractions. So inherently, we've become so much more distracted, so much less present, become less creative, because we don't ever have down moments to just think and ponder and reflect. I think overall we've become worse humans because we don't have moments to reflect. We lack empathy. We lack the ability to have strong connections. We also just lack the social skills anymore, because everyone is just conversating and connecting through a digital medium, not a physical one anymore. And you see that with these studies that have come out. It's funny because I've researched a lot of this stuff historically, but now I've focused more on screen time in kids due to our upcoming marketing campaign. And this stuff is true, and then you go and read the studies and you're like, this is so much worse than I thought. Like the amount of screen time in Japan, I think it's like a 1-year-olds, they did studies of 1-year-olds and screen time, and for kids on multiple hours a day of screen time, which isn't even that crazy, just like a couple hours a day, this does happen like very commonly. It was like a 5x magnitude increase of developmental delays. 5x. We're not talking like 5, 10, 50%, 5-fold. For 5, 6-year-olds spending more than 2 hours a day on devices with screen time, 7x increase risk of showing ADHD like symptoms. And I know you could probably debate if all young boys might show some ADHD type symptoms, but we're talking like the far end. We're talking about the really noticeable difference there. And it goes on and on. Like the executive function just gets hijacked of children from only watching a few minutes of content on one of these devices, with the content being extremely fast frame and switching like a Coco Melon, or I mean any of the TikTok reels or Instagram reels nowadays, a very fast frame. And it's very concerning. And these aren't studies from some fringe researchers. These are like the American Academy of Pediatrics and really well-known journals. And it's scary because I think you look around and parents don't really know what to do. They struggle. They can't lead by example because they live in a digital world. And then they're struggling as a parent. So it's really easy to hand a kid an iPad because they just zoom in. They're gone. They're not, if you give a kid an iPad, they're not even present in that physical reality anymore. They have been captured, and that can be really helpful. Of course, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're doing chores, you're traveling. I get it. But the effects of doing so, it's a short-term benefit that's doing a lot of long-term damage to your child's development and psychology, and really having unknown effects on their biological development. So that's really the state of affairs. I know I kind of went on a tangent, and really all at Daylight that we've tried to do is remove those detractions. So we have a monochrome display that you could explain as a Kindle on steroids, but in reality, and it's a Kindle on steroids because it's fast enough to now be used for anything. You can watch Cocomelon on here, but there's no bright colors. There's no dopaminergic reaction, and you can do it outside. There's no light being emitted from this at all. It's working with the sun. It's working with nature. Battery life's amazing because of that. So all of a sudden, you've removed the Las Vegas casino from the environment that it's in, and you've placed it outdoors, or you've placed it indoors with a candle lighting environment with our amber backlight that's blue light free and flicker free. You've changed the environmental design. So now your Twitter feed looks like a digital newspaper, and it's a lot less compelling. It's a lot less dopaminergic. It's a lot less stimulating. So technology can just be what it was originally meant to be, which is just a tool for learning, for communicating, for education. That's what this should be. It should augment the human experience. It should not detract from it. And that's the big shift, right? We really transformed as a species in the last 20 years. And we now are, debatably cyborgs, because we have technology, we have kind of these devices attached at our hips at all times. We are part technology. That's how connected we are to these devices. but it's really bringing us down. And that's the whole idea with daylight. And the tablet is the first product. It's how do we bring the good from the digital, but keep it in somewhat of an analog experience, close to analog as possible, and allow you to have the natural environment so that you aren't personally hijacked into this artificial reality, and you can have the cognitive sovereignty over your own attention, which is so hard nowadays. And I think the physical is the most underrated thing, and that's where like physically writing your notes, and it feels like paper on the daylight. That's what we tried to emulate, but it's convenient enough to throw in your backpack, and you could not have five notebooks, 10 textbooks. It's all just one thing. And if you do want to access the internet, because don't get me wrong, I'm a big supporter of the digital minimalism movement, the light phone, the whatever, phones that don't even let you have any apps. But let's be real. Who's using that? That's a second phone they might have. I mean, I have one friend who I can only get in contact with via email, and I envy him. But it's just not realistic. Like, people aren't going to give that up. And why should they? ChatGPT, if you use it, AI tools for the right things, I mean, the amount you can learn now in such a short period of time is incredible. The tools that exist. But the problem is, it's an absolute Wild West, just chaos scene when you log on. That's not even a thing anymore. When you just get on a device, you could either learn the deepest depths of biological function or the deepest depths of philosophy and psychology or what have you. But how many people are actually doing that with a large percentage of their time spent on device? Most people end up consuming instead of learning, and then they're really end up being the product, and the device is learning from them as opposed to the other way around. So we got it backwards, and then that algorithm just becomes that much better. So for at Daylight, we're like, hey, we want you to have access to this. Yeah, you can delete apps. Yeah, for the kids stuff, we will have parental controls. You can lock it down. Firm believer that children should not have access to the full internet and social media world until, well, they're not. They shouldn't until they're not children. But there's still brilliant tools available for learning to kids. And then for adults, if you have a different environment, if you take the Las Vegas out of the tablet, you actually will be able to learn more. You'll be able to get out of social media. You'll be able to just stay in a workflow and read something. And that's because we are also building the whole ecosystem, the whole stack, not just the hardware, not just the display. We're also working on the software. So notifications and the context switching is going to be a thing of the past for people on a Daylight, because how could you possibly do your best, deepest work when you're constantly being pinged with notifications or switching apps or toggling back and forth? It's not conducive to how our mind works. And that's why I'm concerned, Ryan, of the state of affairs with just people right now. It's very, very hard to have a conversation of depth anymore. It's all just this very high time preference, like what happened yesterday, what we need to do, head in the sand. They're at the ground level. And it's because we never, ever have a free moment anymore. I mean, it's become a literal, like, it's like a gym exercise at this point, like meditating or going for a walk without your phone. That's like an accomplishment. No, that's normal. That's just like how we should live. That's like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk and like think about my business or think about my relationships or think about just my trajectory in life or how life's going for me. That doesn't happen very often for most people anymore. And it's because every second you have of downtime, you can just go right here for some dopamine. You can just you take that next hit. And I often do that. It's really hard not to, especially when you're busy and doing a lot of things. It makes you feel relevant and connected. And I find in general, when you don't have a ton of in-person physical connections,
Yeah.
that is even a greater pull, because it's supplementing what's missing from your real life. And the problem is, when everyone's doing that, it's going to be really hard to just have physical connection in the first place. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. So our mission at Daylight, to wrap up a very long rant, is to create synergism between humanity, nature, and technology. We don't think it has to be this doom and gloom Wall-E future, but we sure think we're heading that way if we don't make a deliberate kind of stick in the sand charge against it. So I think it's been really exciting so far to see the adoption, and we're really excited to focus more on kids, talking to parents. I don't even need to convince them that this is a problem, and it feels really good to be pouring all my energy and effort into something that matters a lot, because as you can see, I'd much rather be in the mountains every day just like frolicking around, but we got a mission here to really get this out there and inspire change in the community, and it's going to take a whole lot of us to do that. And that's why I always appreciate people who are hosting a podcast, have their own community, about pushing this out there.
Wow. So a couple of recaps. Just amazing. It's a huge testament, and we can see this whenever like a child is upset or misbehaving. They're erratic. You give them a device, and instantly they're like calmed down and like glued to it. That's how powerful this is, because they're going from one state to the other and just like instantly. And I'm glad you noticed or mentioned the casino, because I think people can understand this. It's not just the content that we need to be aware of. It's they utilize these intermittent reward schedules, is what it is. It's rewards without effort, and that gets us. And most people could probably understand that, but it's the light part that I think people miss, because that's complicated for most. Unless you allow yourself to get in here and stay in this like quantum physics, quantum biology range. And another thing that I really want to highlight is, because I suffer from this hugely, is data on autistic sensory processing is the early, let's say for the eyes, the event-related potentials is how they kind of measure this, EEGs, MEGs, or fMRI. It's really heightened. They call it heightened with autistics, meaning it's just hitting these early regions much harder than typicals. So like the retina, lateral geniculate, and the thalamus, and the superior colliculus, these things are just lit up like at visual stimuli versus typicals. And I battle with the eye strain. And like right now, today, doing this, I'm like, my eyes hurt, and I don't like it. But you're right, there's no other alternative. But I've used the DC-1, and I don't suffer from that. So I know that it's like legit. So that's I can't help but just highlight that, because it's such a pleasure, and it's like rewarding.
What are you looking at? A MacBook or?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, being me, suffering from concussions as well. Like in the past, my iPhone was tormenting me actually for
Yeah,
the
I can
longest
feel
time.
it. My eyes are.
And
I've
I
heard.
recently switched to an iPhone 11 because that doesn't have as bad of flicker, and it's like once you cut this stuff out, you notice it even more
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
And I think that's another thing, just to touch upon quickly, that I've really been thinking a lot about, is we have become so numb as a species. And everyone always is like, yeah, no, you get your health back and all this, you're more resilient. It's like, yeah, you're more resilient. But in reality, what you're restoring is sensitivity. And sometimes that feels like you're maybe more susceptible to things or less resilient. But in reality, when you're more sensitive as a human, and I'm not talking just emotionally, I'm talking like physically, spiritually, emotionally, the whole gamut, right? And that's what it means to be human, is to be sensitive and able to perceive these signals and these stimuli in your environment. And that is what you feel. Like, people look at these screens all day and they're like, well, it doesn't bother me. And I'm just like, well, it should, because you're numb and you're so desensitized. And that's why so many people are depressed, because they're getting all of that stimulus, all of that dopamine from their artificial reality. And then everything outside looks gray. And then they have no intuition. They don't know what to do. They're zombies. I mean, that's literally the definition of the NPC, the non-player character, is because they've become so desensitized that their head's just at the ground level walking through life. And ignorance is bliss, don't get me wrong, but I think the real human experience is when you open up sensitivity and you can feel relationships, you can feel the environment around you. And unfortunately, that means you can feel the detriments of screens and EMFs and what have you. But that's what it means to be alive, is to feel. And I would give anything to restore that to more people, to experience that and understand that. And that's why I'm off grid here in Wyoming and really deliberate, because this is when I can feel the most, is when the noise is quenched and the signal comes through crystal clear. And that's where it's like, I know what I'm meant to do. I have the intuition of, people that came before us. You always hear of these superpowers and magic. It's not. It's just human intuitive nature. And there is a quantum physics component to that as well. But you can't do that when you're so desensitized. It just it's not possible. So I think I always like to touch upon that, because I think people, it's easy to go down the negative rabbit hole of everything's bad for us. It's so toxic. Now you're telling me my phone's killing me and whatever. They're like, it's fine for me. But in reality, it's just take a step back and be realistic about it, and think about your day to day and how often you can reflect on these things. And, when you do cut stuff out is when you actually notice it. And that to me is always the most potent way to experience it.
Yeah, allowing yourself a little reset. I also wanted to mention from earlier, with the health or the children, the rates of suicide are increasing at alarming rates and at younger ages. And if you talk to people, they're just like, well, we don't have enough services, or we don't have enough providers and things. But their environments are the cause. You can add a service or providers to each of them, and they're still going to be, it's not going to be a significant
It's
move.
not an upstream solution. That's a
Yeah,
downstream kind of
yeah,
safety net that doesn't really work.
that's harmful. Can you say a little bit more about the light flicker? Because I'm kind of thinking of the pupillary light reflex, which is efferents for the nervous system pathways. The pupillary light reflex kind of bridges the central nervous system with the peripheral nervous system using motor neurons.
Mm-hmm.
And can you just say a little bit about the light flickering?
Yeah, and pupillary reflex is one of the best ways to tell if someone's sympathetic dominant and really has an activated nervous system, if you don't know what that means. But and I know practitioners that's one of the first things they do. And light flicker is a very broad term. And it's basically just describing any light that has a inconsistent or changing amplitude of output. And it's not continuous. It's not just a straight line of a wave function. And that is important because in nature, it is continuous. It's not turning on and off. And that's basically what's going on. And it's mostly from LEDs. A candle could flicker every now and then, but it's so slow that it's not a problem. And, strobe lights, they flicker, but you see it. You see the flicker, right? It's 10s, 20 times a second. And that can really be bad for people with epilepsy or prone to seizures.
Yeah, yeah,
But what's worse is when you reach a threshold where you can't see it anymore.
yeah.
And that's right around like 100 times per second. And our phones are flickering at like 250, 400, 500 times a second because OLED displays. And most LEDs now, they use what's called pulse width modulation to control brightness. So engineers figured out that instead of controlling brightness by just pushing less current through a diode, you could instead cycle the diode on and off. And that's called a duty cycle, is the time on versus the time off. And the more time on, the brighter it would be. The more time off, the less bright it would be. And that is a more efficient way to control brightness. And then the color consistency of the display is better because a diode is a semiconductor. And when you change the amount of current through a diode, you can intrinsically change the output of that semiconductor. And that is another downside to DC dimming, it's called, which is just like a normal way to do it. So now like 99% of diodes, LEDs, I should say, are controlled via pulse width modulation. And pulse width modulation is used for everything. It's used for radio frequencies, like pulse signals, modulated signals. That's the norm. And it's a shame because when you're operating in that frequency range of a couple hundred times per second to even up to 5,000 times per second, it's very problematic. And the lower it is, the closer to like visual perception it is, the worse it is for our brain and eyes, because it's just above where you can't see it, but your brain feels it. And they have a flicker index. It's an electrical engineering standard. They have a whole scoring system. And they've really done studies showing that until you get to like 10, 20,000 hertz or 20,000 times per second that it's turning on and off, it's felt by the brain. So they could use PWM and just make it really high switching frequency, but then that kind of defeats some of the engineering benefits that you get. And MacBooks are better than iPhones because of the display technology. But it's really unnecessary, and they could just use direct current dimming. So in the daylight, that's what we did. Changed one circuit. Sounds very simple, and it is. But when you're a small startup, it is a big challenge to do that. And yeah, it's just really dumb, right? Because it's like we engineer technology without any biological thought in mind. And the flicker stuff is really frustrating because it's quite literally unnecessary, and no one's really gaining any benefit from it. Like, yes, you get a slightly better color consistency, and maybe your battery life is 5% more efficient. Like, that's it. Wow. Okay. On the other side of that trade is debilitating headaches for people who are sensitive, eye strain, eye fatigue, aggravating symptoms in ASD people, anxiety. Wow, that seems like a terrible trade-off. Why are we doing that? It's because nobody knows. Nobody even knows this is a thing. And we put out some content for daylight, and so many people are like, oh, I had no idea. Like, this is why this is giving me a headache. And, you know, it's why I switched to an iPhone 11. I look at my old iPhone, or someone gives me their phone. I have about 20 seconds before I get a headache. And I'm not kidding. And you can sound like an insane person when you say that. You're like, no, I can't. I literally can't look at those screens anymore. I can't look at OLED screens.
Yeah. You can
And, you know, you might relate to that. People with TBIs, people with really bad eye strain. And we've met these people. We've gone to neurooptometry conferences. They're the most sensitive, right? Because they've had neurological damage or they have a neurological condition. And I just want to tell people that if they feel it and it's driving them insane, that means it's impacting you too. You just can't feel it to the degree. So everyone would be better off. Everyone's nervous system would be less activated if we just got rid of flickering light. And PWM, the pulse width modulation, is not the only form of flicker. It's the main one. There are, and we're still learning, because there is like pixel level dithering or flickering, where if you have like an 8-bit display, and again, this is all like color mixing, everything is trying to get the most bright, saturated, like vast spectrum of colors possible. And there's only a limited amount of color combinations they can do. So what they do is instead they dither or they flicker pixels in different colors like very quickly, and you can look up pixel dithering or temporal dithering, and on some devices it's very problematic. So even if you don't have pulse width modulation, you do have an inherent problem. And because the daylight computer is monochrome, that's not an issue at all. But people who are really, really sensitive, again, they can't they can't look at it. And any display, we have someone in our team who is like the highest level sensitivity person, and he's researching about how even some aspects of the daylight could be improved from like a visual comfort perspective. So it's exciting because we're still learning. Like the daylight is so much better than a MacBook and an iPhone and normal displays, but there's still leaps and bounds to be made, because even a daylight, even any display is unnatural, right? It is not the same type of light to be consumed as we are in nature. So how do we keep progressing? And it's funny because a lot of, the displays from like 20 years ago were actually like the least stimulating, the least problematic. So it's almost like we need to go backwards, which is kind of what we did at daylight, going back to an LCD instead of, moving forward with OLED. And it's like we need to stop, take some steps back, and then move forward in a better direction. And that's the analogy for all of technology.
That's a great description, and I appreciate you highlighting that with the flickering and the pupillary light reflex, because that's and since I added with the heightened sensory processing, um, the ocular motor is involved with the pupillary light reflex, and that's in the mesencephalon, the midbrain for the lay public, and that's huge in autism. Its roles were motor movement, sensory integration, and here's the one that, because of what you were saying, it biases the attention of the living organism to the outside world. And since you hit on, we're just isolated, that is, I think, where it would be happening. That's a major area or region of interest, I think, is that mesencephalon, the superior colliculus, and that third cranial nerve is doing that. So I'm glad that we went into detail there. And since you mentioned kids, can you say a little bit about the new initiative from Daylight?
Yeah, yeah. We really sat down. I mean, we've always been targeting parents for kids and really most passionate about that, but we really sat down. We're like, okay, where can we have the biggest impact?
Mm-hmm.
Where are people going to get this that need it most? And not only is that beneficial to the public, it's beneficial to us as a company. We need to grow. We need to sell units. Our Gen 1 is amazing for those who get it. It's not amazing for those who don't get it. So let's not focus effort on trying to convince people of why they need something. When I've been talking to more teachers, more superintendents, more parents, I don't need to convince them that devices are a problem.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. They're looking for answers. They are so concerned. And you see it, they're banning smartphones in schools. iPad kids is a meme. They're guilt in parenting now. It's a conundrum. And special education specifically is, it's hard. It's really hard. So that was eye-opening for me. The other eye-opening thing was I was talking to all these superintendents in New Hampshire, and I had no idea kids were getting Chromebooks in kindergarten in some states. That's crazy. 6 years old, their own device. And of course it's controlled and whatever, but you're giving a child a portal to a new world when they haven't even really got their feet set in the first world, in the real world. It's completely unnecessary. And that to me just shed light on really how dire this problem is becoming. But also, in the same breath, all the superintendents were like, we don't even want this. We want to figure something else out. This happened during COVID, and we don't really know what to do. And yeah, they're like, what you guys are doing is awesome. We want to figure out how to get it into schools. There's barriers to entry for public school, as you can imagine. So going direct to parents first is easier. Homeschooling has become a massive trend as well. So
Hmm.
we are definitely want to get in front of that audience, because that's, I think, a key target customer. But you think about kids, right? You can nerd out on it and be like really in the science. And I have done that, and it's crazy. Children let 50% more blue light through their retinas because they're underdeveloped. They hold the devices 3 times closer to their body. So now you're getting 50% more blue light, threefold. So, wow, all of a sudden, that's 6x, right? The impact of blue light. Then their brains are not fully developed. So they don't have the frontal lobes, the ability to actually pull themselves out of reality, because they're still mapping reality. This is this is learning. This is curiosity. This is developing neural circuitry, and you've now given them something to develop in that is completely artificial and foreign, and you wonder why that leads to all these developmental delays. And you can get into the EMF piece, same thing, right? We're talking like 10, maybe 50, 100 times. It depends on the age. For an infant, for someone, a child under 2 years old, it could be 50 to 100 times more sensitive to these inputs. For a toddler, um, dozens, like 10, 20 times. For
Yeah,
a young child, maybe 5, 10 times. And then it goes slowly down, but it's still like fully developed brains, 25, fully myelinated, which is
yeah, my
protecting them
gosh. Yeah,
from these electromagnetic inputs. And fully developed retinas is also like adulthood. It's not like 15. So they're getting more light of the wrong kind. And
mm,
why do you think that is? Why do you think it lets in more blue light? Because they need to build that neural circuitry. They
mm,
need those dopaminergic responses, but they're supposed to get that from this environment, from outdoors, from falling on a hill, from riding a bike, from seeing something go by and being curious about it. That is the dopamine, that is the extra blue light, why they're getting it. It's not to hand them an iPad and to be so enthralled in Cocomelon that when you take it away from them, they throw the worst tantrum that you've ever seen. And it just keeps getting
yeah,
worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden, you don't really have a family anymore.
mm,
You have kids on devices that are rotten at the core due to no fault of their own,
hmm,
unless they're on a device. And you have disconnected parents, and you have a family unit that is completely discombobulated and centered around this digital reality and world, because you can't really extract it from the day to day anymore.
hmm. To
And
try.
all of a sudden they're 7 years old and they go to school and they're on these devices.
Yeah.
So it's really scary. And I think what's really encouraging is that the awareness of this problem has grown because it's gotten so bad. And you see all these schools popping up, the homeschooling, the private schools, no tech till X age, and we're all for that. So we are in full support of delaying introduction to technology as long as possible. But as I mentioned earlier, it is extremely powerful tool if used responsibly, and that's what we're there for. So we think that the daylight is the perfect first device for a child. Now, this doesn't mean that you buy a daylight and give it to your 5-year-old for 5 hours a day. No, this means that if you have a 5-year-old and you're ready to introduce them to technology, you have a daylight computer and you ease them into what it means to interact in a digital medium. They can write notes on it. They can listen to songs on it. They can learn a language. They can do the very basic stuff, but they can put it down. It's
Yeah.
it's less attractive than playing in the backyard. It's less attractive than going to the swimming pool or the lake. It's less attractive than making dinner with mom. That's the point. And then when you are cleaning up, it's nighttime, they're ready to go to bed, but you could use 20 minutes to do something, chores, emails, and you give a daylight to your son or daughter and put on some old cartoons as a winding down moment, or they're reading on it, and the amber backlight. And parents have sent me literal pictures of their kids falling asleep on their daylight.
Mm.
That's what this is for. It's for kids to use when it's needed, not to become the main source of enjoyment of their childhood. Because if the main source of enjoyment of their childhood is a device, that means we're in a really bad state for parenting for the next generation, because that means everything else is less exciting than their iPad. And that's a world I don't want to live in.
Mm.
And if I was a parent, I certainly would not want to live in that. But I know it can be a real challenge, and I know parents are working really hard, but that's also the benefit of daylight. It's like, for when it's needed, there's something that's there. And as they get older, of course, you slowly increase the amount of time spent in a digital world responsibly, but it should never take away from the play-based childhood, from the outdoors-based childhood, from the family-based childhood. That is the core, and that's what we need to return to. And I think it's really possible. I think the signs we're seeing is very encouraging, and I'm excited to see how it goes. I can't wait. The feedback we've gotten from parents so far has been fantastic, and that, especially for neurodivergent or special needs kids, you even have your hands full even more. So as a
Mm.
parent,
Yeah.
so I think that's going to be a very powerful tool, but it will remain as a tool.
Yeah. Okay. That's that's a great population. It's a great mission. Tell me about the surprise mention from Danny Jones on Joe Rogan and what that's meant to daylight.
I think it's cool.
Yeah.
It's just, we paid $0 for that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
it's
It's
just
just.
organic plug, and that's what we love, right? Like, Danny's a great guy. He's a father. He gets it, and that's what it's gonna take. We don't have a budget like Apple. We don't have a budget like Athletic Greens or whoever's sponsoring these big ass podcasts. This is going to be an organic grassroots movement, and that's what we enjoy. And we want to get out and talk to people. That's why I love doing these podcasts, because you hear it. That's what we're all about. We're not doing this to make money. Obviously, if it's successful, we inherently would make money, and a lot of people will make money. But we're doing this because it's needed, and we are working our ass off. We have a very small team for a consumer hardware company, and when we get those moments like that, being shouted out on a big podcast, obviously it helps sales, but it kind of just like, wow, we're already there. We're already close,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's just like, activation energy that's required, and then something will end up running on its own legs if it's good enough, and if the product market fit is there, and it's really at its core essence a positive contribution to society. And I think we're very close to that. And I think our Daylight Kids initiative, which should be launched probably by the time this comes out, is gonna take us there, because that's going to be where we can have the highest impact, and it's going to be a lot of fun, because no one's come out and there's these cheap tablets that have like all these parental controls and they're safe and whatever, but no one's really come out and made like a healthier device, like at the
Mm-hmm.
core, across all like areas of tech. And the most exciting part is what we can do once we're successful enough. You talk to
Mhm.
John about RF. I've talked to him. I want to reinvent wireless technology. I think
Mhm.
it's possible. We could have Wi-Fi routers that have automatic shutoffs, like lower output power, be dynamic about it. Like we can do so much. We have custom LEDs. We're very close with LED suppliers. We could do really great indoor lighting, complementary to the daylight. Like we can do a whole lot of stuff that really changes it to an environmental design company in a positive way. And I think that's what's most exciting is once we become successful enough, we can really increase the surface areas that we're on, do next gen products, of course, new tablet, monitors been heavily requested, phones been heavily requested, all these things. And we think they're all great ideas and it's just a matter of time. So that's probably the most exciting piece.
Yeah, just a picture of the daylight phone, and I got excited about that. Uh, let 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 people know how to get in contact with Daylight or how to search for your product.
Yeah, so our main website is dailycomputer.com. If you're a parent and have kiddos, it's going to be kids.dailycomputer.com. That will be launched on August 28th, I believe, if all things go well in the next week. And yeah, socials, we are at Daylight Co. And yeah, if you want to follow me, I'm at Tristan underscore health on Instagram, at Bitcoin and underscore beef on Twitter. But check out our website. This doesn't become successful unless we have this big word of mouth kind of acceleration in terms of spreading the word. So implore you to, test, try it out. We're often doing demos, events, etc. Follow us on socials for that. And then spreading the word in the community and sharing feedback. So you can always contact us, hello@daylightcomputer.com as well.
The best marketing tool is word of mouth and positive feedback, and it's great stuff. Well, thanks a lot, Tristan, and I'll let you get back to nature. And I'm kind of jealous of it, so I'm like,
I gotta get back to work, so don't worry.
yeah,
Everyone calls, but thanks so much, Ryan. It's great to connect. I appreciate giving me a chance to talk about it all.
yeah, I appreciate your movement and missionary here. So good luck with everything.
Thank you.
I would like to take a moment and mention a pressing issue we are seeing in our modern world, and that is tech use and tech light. The data are impressive and concerning on isolated wavelengths of light, especially shorter wavelengths, which is blue light. For those that don't know, we have chromophores, which are special proteins that absorbs specific wavelengths of light. For blue light, the light that is LED light and tech light, that protein is called melanopsin. Melanopsin is responsible for our circadian biology, physiology and cell functioning, hormone regulation, and even a connection to an area huge for mood. A consideration we should include is this protein was not even discovered until 1998. It seems important for us to understand how our biology uses the different wavelengths of light for various aspects of our biology. This blue light chromophore is our master controller, our master clock. Remember, circadian rhythm is a two-part process, two independent parts, light and dark. For a quick reference, see the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. But for now, I have something exciting. I want to introduce a product unlike any other product available. A highlight is the product from Daylight Computer Company created their product based on these factors. The Daylight computer is completely blue light free. It has no flicker. Short wavelength flicker is extremely harmful for our eyes and downstream biology. Light flicker is constantly turning our central nervous system on and off. Essentially, it is like going to a light switch and repeatedly turning it on and off. The problem is, blue light and LED light does this, and it is so rapid you cannot even perceive this in real time. The Daylight computer is the lowest stimulation and foremost for sensory sensitive users. It is no question that the alternative product, especially when used at night, do not address or consider this in their product. It is so toxic to human biology. Big tech corporations have patents on how their short wavelength implicate the human nervous system. And a bonus, despite Daylight computer not having backlight, it is very functional for outdoor use. And of course, increased sunlight is always preferred. I am happy to offer a discount for the Daylight computer. You can use the code AUTISM for a $25 off coupon. Again, use the code AUTISM and the discount code for $25 off. See the link in the show notes to Daylight Computer Company, or just give it a quick search in your internet browser. Use the code AUTISM for $25 off. I would like to mention Chroma, lights designed for humans. Chroma, a Seattle-based innovator founded by ex-NASA and Air Force engineer Michael Shapiro, is on a mission to enhance physical and mental health with purpose-built devices, unlocking peak human health, cognitive function, and performance. Shapiro launched Chroma to restore the natural light lost to screens in indoor living and delivers faster recovery, sharper minds, and better sleep. Their products hit hard. The Iron Forge speeds muscle repair with red and near-infrared light, while the Skylight mimics sunlight to boost sleep and energy. A standout, the Forge lamp, is a portable gem that fires 660 nanometer and 850 nanometer light to energize mitochondria and heal tissues on the go. Remember the 4 red light chromophores on cytochrome C-oxidase, frequently talked about in the podcast. This is why their products are built with military-grade durability that have lasting impact. Chroma's tech fuses precision and power. Gallium titride power supplies, smaller, cooler, and stronger than silicone, provide flicker-free light that's easy on the eyes. High-powered LEDs target key wavelengths for skin, tissue, and cellular health, with smart heat management for the lasting impact. Every design decision Chroma makes serves a purpose: to create devices that are precise, durable, and effective for improving human life. Remember, humans use different wavelengths of light for different functions of life. Remember when I ask, what do you think light is? Chroma designs with our biology in mind, from sleep aids and wound healing to mitochondrial energy, full body lights and blue light blocking glasses. They are US made and Chroma ships globally. and accepts FSA and HSA payments. Use Autism at checkout for a 10% off discount. That's Autism at checkout for a 10% off discount.